Okay, I think we'll crack on. We've got lots to get through this morning. So, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is Morag Moffat. I'm a partner in the employment team at Burness Paul. So we've seen a real increase in the need for advice from the HR and legal teams that we work with in relation to matters related to neurodiversity and supporting neurodivergent employees at work. So we are really delighted to host this series of webinars with our partner, the super neurodiversity charity, the Salvesen Mindroom Centre. I'm really delighted to be joined by Nellie Whaley of the Centre, who will lead each of the sessions. And today is the first of 4 sessions that we're running on neuroinclusion at work. And it follows on from our legal framework for neurodiversity webinar, which we ran earlier in the year and which was incredibly popular. So the focus for today's session is on understanding ADHD in the workplace. And Nellie will ADHD, its nuances, commonly reported traits, strengths, and differences, and give practical suggestions for employers wishing to support employees with ADHD. So there's a few housekeeping matters before we start. We'd ask that if you could please keep yourselves on mute just to limit any background noise. We would be really pleased to take any questions you have at the end of the session. So please do feel free to pop any that occur to you during it into the chat function, and we can pick those up at the end. Lastly, the session will be recorded, and the recording will be emailed around to all of those who are able to join us today and those who signed up but weren't able to manage. I will post a link in the chat function to the details of the other sessions that we're running on autism, on dyslexia and dyspraxia, and then the final session being just on fostering a neuro-inclusive culture at work for those of you who may not already have signed up to the other sessions. So with that, I will hand over to Nellie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morag, for that lovely introduction and a warm welcome to everybody joining today's session. Just as a quick introduction to myself, I am Nellie Whaley. I am the training manager at Mindroom. I'll give you a little bit of an overview about our charity in a moment. Morag has run through the housekeeping, but just in addition, just to let you know that the slides which I'll present today, you will have a copy of these. And if anybody would like any additional bit of information or have questions, please pop it into chat because I can add some things in towards the end. And if I don't get a chance to answer all questions, I will put together a bit of a Q&A fact sheet with questions popped in. Contact details around Mindroom and our neuroinclusion at work will be provided at the end of the session as well. So again, these will come to you when I finish the presentation. So just for those who may be the first session joining of us hosting a training session, just to give you a very small introduction to Salvesen Mindroom Centre. So that is our Sunday name, but we are more known as Mindroom. We've been around for about 24 years now. So we were established in 2000, and that was by Sophie and Robin Dow. And it was really to raise awareness of neurodevelopmental conditions. And this was very much based on lived experiences of them supporting their daughter Annie, who is photographed in the picture. As when Annie was very young, she was diagnosed with a very rare chromosome deletion, which resulted in an intellectual disability and a form of neurodivergence. So really, our organisation was set up to provide information and support to other families. And now today we deliver a range of activities and service, which of course includes what I'm doing today, delivering training, but we do also have a direct help and support. So Mindroom offers free advice to kind of families, parent and carers and children and young people across Scotland to support around various issues. That could be education, rights, support, social work, workplace. So if anybody of you are here on the call who may want to access any of our services, I will make sure I put those details in as well. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm going to keep it brief for today. So to get started with the actual session today, Morag has covered the kind of learning objectives. And just to give you a bit of an outline in this presentation today, I'm going to provide a broad overview of ADHD with a specific focus on adults in the workplace. I understand that people might be here with lived experience, might be supporting their children and young people as well, but the information which I talk about today will be focused on adults. It is important to know that not everybody will experience all the traits associated with ADHD at all times. And there are elements which I mentioned, which of course are not going to be applicable for everybody. It's really recognizing that everybody is unique, but I will be highlighting elements of ADHD which may impact individuals in the workplace. So really, my goal today is to offer you a broaden understanding of ADHD and really highlight the diverse range of differences and strengths individuals may experience. So I will just move on to my next slide. So on my screen here, this is a formal medication, formal medical definition of ADHD. So I'll just read this out for everybody. So ADHD is a behavioral disorder that typically manifests as a persistent pattern of inattention and hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning and development and is more frequent and severe than is typically observed in most individuals, which is a bit of a mouthful of a definition. And I think it's really important to highlight that a lot of medical definitions do emphasize traits, and in particular of ADHD, as a disorder. It's in the name, which focuses on some of the negative aspects associated with the assessment and diagnostic process of actually kind of getting a diagnosis of ADHD. So to provide you with a bit more of a balanced perspective, the word cloud on the right, which we'll see here, highlights some of the more positive aspects of ADHD. And of course, we're going to talk about that as we go on today. Now, there is a growing belief that the name itself can be quite misleading. Firstly, the term attention deficit is seen by some as inaccurate, as individuals with ADHD often have an abundance of attention, but they may have difficulty with regulating or controlling and kind of focusing their attention. Secondly, the hyperactivity aspect tends to change and decrease as a child matures into adulthood. And also, it's important to note that traits can fluctuate in times of stress. So that could be that transition, maybe as an adult going into parenthood, so actually having your child. It could be a change of employment, a change of job, and financial changes as well. So there is a popular misconception that actually obtaining a diagnosis is easy. And I'm going to highlight a slide in a moment of actually a common pathway, although there are local variations to consider. So if there are any specific questions on locality, again, please pop that in the chat. Again, I'm just giving you a bit of a broad overview, and this is, I would say, like an explanatory. Is that my word I'm thinking? This is what it should be, but of course, not in every local authority, it's going to be the same. So on the screen here, you can see a bit of a flow in terms of actually what are the first steps. If you was an adult and you was thinking, actually, I would like to pursue the neurodevelopmental pathway as an adult, or maybe you've got friends or colleagues you're supporting. So there are a clear set of diagnostic criteria. And as an adult, you normally have to meet a specific number to get a diagnosis. However, this can be further complicated by the following criteria, which I'll just mention here. So to receive a diagnosis of ADHD, there must be evidence that the traits have been presented before the age of 12. So as an adult, of course, thinking back all the way many years or many moons ago might be pose a bit of a challenge. So here, what we would always recommend is kind of take notes, get feedback from family members, friends at the time, and even looking back at kind of educational notes if you've got access to them. So it's really important that you're able to evidence and talk about those experiences before the age of 12. Another aspect is that actually the traits, and we're going to talk about those in a moment, have occurred in two or more settings. So that could be such as the home or education or work or in the community. Thirdly, it must be present for the least kind of 6 months. So it's kind of that ongoing, the traits are ongoing being presented. And there should be a evidence that it's kind of interfering or reducing your quality of social, academic, or occupational functioning. So it's really important that it's not exclusively caused by um, psychotic disorder and are not better explained by another disorder. So yeah, that is the key criteria. And I know there's a lot of words in there which might seem quite negative, but actually, if you go through the process, those are the things which you'll need to be able to evidence. That's kind of why I'm mentioning it today. And just to highlight what you can see on the screen, the first point of contact really is to kind of speak to your GP. That's really like to go through the NHS pathway, that's what would be the first step. Then they would refer to adult mental health service. Then you may have an additional screening or triage. And then this is when you'll get referred to an ADHD specialist for assessment. And then a post-diagnostic plan agreed. I know that does seem like a simple procedure, but we know that there's waiting lists involved at the moment. It's free. Sadly, I read a Guardian article a couple of weeks ago, and it actually said that somebody waited nearly 8 years, which I just feel is was an incredible story to read. But it's just that there is some waiting list when it does come to kind of the NHS at the moment. But just to give you some examples of actually the kind of things which may impact somebody in the workplace, and things that you could maybe evidence if you was going through the diagnostic pathway. It might be kind of problems performing your required duties at work. It might actually just getting the job done efficiently or getting started. You might have some complications with your supervisor. It might be changing jobs quite frequently. It might be that you get fired from work. You might have difficulties with other team members. There might be difficulties with your attendance, kind of being late. It might be difficulties taking on new tasks. And you might have maybe received some kind of poor performance evaluations from your line manager. These are just examples. So it should be noted that this is going to be different for everybody, and I just wanted to highlight a few things which might occur for somebody and what you could maybe evidence when you was going through that. So I've talked about the waiting list, and then obviously the alternative is a private diagnosis. So I think it is important that I just mention this today, because when I do speak to a lot of workplaces and in particular adults, um, it is that conversation that actually I'm in a position, I'm thinking about going for a private diagnosis. So I think it's really important to have an informed decision. So here on the screen, private diagnosis can reduce waiting times. I think that's probably why most people go for a private diagnosis, because it kind of overcomes the issue if there wasn't any local provision or if you have to wait a long time. But it's also really important to note that there is a cost involved in gaining a private diagnosis. So at the moment, it can actually cost around up to £3,000 for somebody to go through that. Um, when you go through a private diagnosis pathway as well, they tend to assess for one diagnosis. So it really would be for an ADHD for assessment, for example. Whereas if you're going through the NHS, this would be more recognized as the neurodevelopmental pathway, where actually you could be identified for more than one diagnosis. So often providers will just screen for just that ADHD, and they may not screen for other co-occurring conditions such as autism, dyslexia, or dyspraxia. I'm going to talk about co-occurrence in a moment as well. So it's important to have that informed decision before you go through the process. It's also important to note like quality. Of course, it does vary, so always check, even ask GPs. The ADHD Foundation are quite a good website, because they actually have a list and they can put you through to some accredited private assessment. So again, I'll send that link after. Um, and if when you are provided with that outcome and maybe a follow-up, or it might be such as care or medication, it's important to recognize that actually, if you go through the private diagnosis, not all general GPs may recognize that. So I know that I've worked with even young people, but adults themselves, where they've had to then fund ongoing payments for, such as melatonin, for an example. And that can cost up to about £300 a month. So again, just to before you go through it, it's important to know that it might be something as an individual you may need to kind of continue the costs of. Um, and then last but not least, here we've got kind of the local authority here. And again, it's kind of that similar with the GP. If you were looking to access local authority support, the local authority may not accept a private diagnosis. So just be particularly mindful of this when you are seeking a diagnosis. So access, advice, do some research before you do that as well. So yeah, just speak to your GP would always be my first advice, and then you can make that decision after, once maybe you've done a little bit of a research. So I hope that's helpful just to see what the pathway is to gain a diagnosis. Now let's delve into a few specifics of ADHD, and it can be characterized in three types. Whenever I deliver a session on ADHD, people are always quite surprised. Maybe they're not quite aware of that. So this slide will show the three main types, and it also shows the traits which link to each one. So the traits in the slides, which you can see in the bullet points, are taken from their assessment criteria. So these subtypes here, which are in orange, serve as examples from the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. So specific traits and their severity can, of course, vary among individuals. And recognizing these subtypes helps us understand the diverse presentations of ADHD, and then helps us tailor the support accordingly. Um, so I'll just go through these briefly. So if we look through this one, so this is kind of if somebody is predominantly hyperactive, they could have a type hyperactive as part of their ADHD diagnosis. So this subtype primarily exhibits that hyperactive and impulsive behaviors without significant inattention. So hyperactivity, that may manifest in various ways. So that could be including excessive physical activity, excessive talking, maybe disruptive behaviors, fidgetness, maybe lack of consideration of consequences. It could be engaging in risk-taking behaviors, and it might be somebody with a bit more heightened emotional reactivity. So that's this type one here, which is hyperactive. Now we've got this one, which is predominantly somebody who's inattentive. Now, what this means, that it is somebody which has the inattention without the prominent hyperactivity or impulsivity. So it might be interesting for somebody, for someone to call that actually women and girls with ADHD are more likely to be diagnosed with this subtype, this inattentive subtype. So individuals may appear unmotivated. It might be that they exhibit kind of daydreaming tendencies or report frequently zoning out. It might be struggling with disorganization, experience kind of forgetfulness. They might face challenges with short-term memory. It might be somebody experiencing kind of procrastination, like actually struggling to start something. So yeah, that difficulty may be initiating tasks. Now, the most popular type to be diagnosed is actually the combined type. So this is when somebody is displaying both inattentive and the hyperactivity and impulsivity traits. So individuals with the subtype of combined will exhibit a combination of traits from both of these categories. So, we're going to delve now into the bit of the impact of ADHD on somebody's life. But it is important, of course, to remember that everybody will have their unique profile. So, not everybody is going to experience all of these traits all at once. So, it is important just to remember that these traits can and they do fluctuate, particularly at times at stress, when somebody's stressed, as I mentioned earlier. So just to kind of highlight some of these, which are quite frequent presentations. So I've kind of linked them out. So if this one, the page here, really focuses on the attention side of presentations. So we've got this one here, which is executive functioning. So this is our skills which help us plan, organize, focus, and complete tasks. So these skills also help us manage our emotions, help us use our short-term memory, and effectively manage our time and stay on track. There are controlled by specific areas of the brain. It's actually our prefrontal cortex. So individuals with ADHD may experience these challenges in various areas with their executive functioning skills. I've mentioned some of these already, but just to give you a couple more, it might be maintaining motivation at work. It could actually be managing distractions in the workplace, their working memory. It might be time management difficulties. So it might be somebody who's frequently late or actually misses appointments altogether. It might be somebody appearing disorganized and actually just struggling with their emotional regulation as well. So that's kind of all in tune with our executive functioning. This one here, so it could be that somebody is zoning out or appears preoccupied. So this could be, daydreaming or being mentally preoccupied. It could be difficulty concentrating on a conversation, and then maybe later finding it difficult to recall the content of that conversation. Um, it might be actually somebody frequently changing the subject during conversation as well. Um, in terms of more comprehension and reading, it might be that you read a page of a book with actually even be able to comprehend what that information was. So you might not be able to say one thing from that page. This one here, the next one, which I like to highlight, is kind of carelessness and perfectionist tendencies. So it might be somebody presentation which actually making careless mistakes due to maybe not having difficulties reading instructions. They might just not be doing that carefully. It might be difficulty working with attention to detail, or it might be that they're just working too quickly. So that just leads to a few errors being made. It might be somebody making mistakes in written work, and it might be you might have a significant difference between somebody's verbal presentation and their written presentation. But on the other side, it's important to kind of recognize this perfectionism. So this could be actually somebody who even potentially can develop a clinical co-occurring condition of OCD. That there is quite a co-occurrence with ADHD and OCD. And it might be somebody who is constantly checking things like repeatedly. It might be somebody on the flip side working very slowly because they're very particularly detailed orientated and in their mind they know and they can see how they want it to pan out. So is are really kind of making sure that there's no mistakes being made. So yeah, it can kind of be two coins sometimes. The next one here, we've got procrastination and worry. So this is might be excessive procrastination or actually really heightened stress about actually starting a task. It might be that difficulty of like, also prioritizing. They might have the desire to actually begin and complete a task, but actually just really struggle to initiate it to begin with. So it's just that feeling of worry, and that can trigger somebody to actually not be able to even start work. It could also be represented somebody maybe missing a deadline due to postponing certain tasks. Um, I've mentioned kind of concentration and focus a little bit this morning. But just to give a couple more examples of what this might kind of demonstrate in the workplace, it might be somebody who excels in areas of their interest, but actually struggles in less captivating tasks. So it might be that our job roles are very diverse sometimes. So sometimes if it isn't something which is really interesting or there's a real meaning to why it needs to be achieved, maybe focusing on that task might be challenging for that individual. Um, I think I've talked about kind of, just that generally getting bored quite easily, might be distracted by the environment around them, but actually, what's their thoughts as well, and kind of easily getting sidetracked. This one here, kind of following instructions, that might be difficulty recalling verbal instructions. It might be actually difficulty following instructions from manuals if it's not clear. It might be somebody's ability to be able to multitask and hyper focus on a task, but actually they might struggle with kind of everyday tasks. So it's that kind of comparison there. Um, Timekeeping, this is also referred to as time blindness. So it might be issues estimating task duration or requiring time limits to complete tasks, and frequently being late or losing track of time. Forgetfulness, so that might just be forgetting appointments or other obligations, misplacing keys or work agendas or other items. They might need frequent reminders for appointments. Um, they might have to do regular trips home. So you're halfway to work and it's like, oh, I've forgotten my daily planner. I'm rewinding and kind of having to head back home again. So it might be somebody who relies on rigid lists to actually prevent forgetting a task or forgetting something as well. And that can just be a helpful tip as well. Um, we've got organization here. So that might be somebody who appears highly disorganized. It might be somebody maybe with a messy desk or frequently losing or misplacing items. It could also be somebody over planning tasks and might be inefficient with their planning as well. Maybe regularly double booking appointments. So maybe in their team's calendar, they've got 3 appointments and it's all on the same day. Maybe they've just accepted without actually looking if there's other appointments there. They might actually waste some time searching for things which are misplaced or just something else which is on their mind. Um, but another flip side, they might actually feel very anxious or panicked when others move things around them. So they might actually feel very settled with their environment, and that can feel very comfortable to them, but actually it can cause anxiety if things are moved quite unexpectedly as well. Um, and last but not least, kind of that short-term memory. So this could be somebody experiencing difficulties, and that might be often just forgetting information shortly it's presented. I know that I'm giving a lot of verbal information today. Um, I don't expect everybody to remember everything what I'm saying, and it might be that there's a lot of information lost. So this is why we look back at slides after today's session to kind of help recall that. And that's why we've recorded the session as well. But in the workplace, it might also be individuals have an exceptional long-term memory, but it's just that instant kind of retracting information which has just been said to them can be a little bit difficult for them. So that's their kind of attention, which of course can also be that inattention type of ADHD. And then the next one here, which are the impulsiveness and hyperactivity side of ADHD. And again, these are traits which will be exhibit in some individuals, but not all individuals. And I think for ADHD, the impulsiveness and hyperactivity can also seem a bit of a hallmark for ADHD. That's kind of what it's known for. So I hopefully by even just seeing the innovative start, we've noted that there are other elements to ADHD, but it is important that we do recognize and notice these traits. I'm not going to go to these into too much detail. But just to highlight and give you a couple examples. So the first one here, interests and hobbies. So it might be somebody with ADHD may often switch between hobbies and interests. So they might frequently leave unfinished projects or really have a desire to start something new. They might report struggling to actually relax during their free time, and they might actually enjoy engaging in more of a physical activity. And that's what they find their relaxation in, because, they just prefer to be stimulated in that way. Um, it might be somebody actually reporting kind of difficulties completing a book or even finishing a movie. And it can be, this constant need to be busy and occupy themselves, which then, of course, can lead to exhaustion or feelings of overtiredness as well. Um, the next one here, risk taking. So this could be that somebody is quite comfortable with risk and pressure and chaos. It could be somebody maybe drawn to extreme sports. It might be somebody who has increased risk of accidents, could even be car accidents or car rage. It might be a higher risk of engaging in other behaviors. And also this could be linked to kind of substances as well. So it could be smoking, alcohol consumption, um, drug use, or some other unhealthy coping mechanisms as well. Um, Here we've got talkative. It just might be somebody who might come across as overly confident in public settings. It might be that they have difficulty in, knowing when to stop or knowing when to initiate conversation. So it might be somebody who has kind of just said what's on their mind in a conversation, but that might have been kind of butted into somebody else. And it might be somebody who just alternatively might become quite introverted to avoid that kind of social rejection due to kind of negative experiences as well. Um, I've mentioned kind of that energy and that restlessness kind of linked to interests and hobbies. But it might be somebody who might avoid kind of lengthy meetings. And it's if you're supporting somebody, like, and even if you've got supervision, for example, it might be doing that, having a walk and talk meeting instead of like sitting directly with them, for example. So, and it might be having kind of bit of fidget toys around with you as well. So just thinking that somebody actually needs to be stimulated to be able to concentrate. So it might be somebody who finds it difficulty to complete task if they don't have something else to kind of stimulate them whilst doing that as well. Emotional regulation. So this one might be that they might be having difficulties with just regulating themselves. So it might be just quite emotionally impulsive. It might be expressing their feelings quite openly. It might be somebody quick to experience quite intense emotions. That could be intense happiness. It could be intense anger. So it's really experiencing these big emotions. Impatience, that might be just struggling to wait. So even just in a shop or in a queue. So it might be somebody who attempts to jump queues. That's something I've got a few friends who have done that. They might just have difficulty waiting for that turn in conversations. And if you've given them an estimate of time and you've kind of gone off that, they might get quite frustrated that it hasn't met that time frame. So they've start to get frustrated. It might also be impatientness in terms of relationships. So it might be somebody who's prone to quickly to start relationships or end relationships or start jobs due to the kind of that impatient nature. Impulsiveness, I think we've mentioned that already today. So just, being able to, that it can manifest in many ways, being impulsive. So that could be that ability to just start something new, but it also could be impulsiveness in terms of kind of spending money. That's some, as adults, it might be overspending, maybe having financial difficulties. It might even be what we're eating. So it might be somebody who's prone to binge eating in times of stress. It might be just, again, picking activities and then being impulsive with that moment in time. So what kind of has that urge in that moment? I've mentioned sensory seeking. It's kind of linked to kind of that fidget. fidget toys, but it is important to recognize that like doodling, that kind of thing can be a real help, or having a walk round as well. So there's a few others there, but I'm mindful that I've kind of covered this in quite a bit of detail. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is just highlighting some of the hidden challenges. So we've talked about what we can see. We've talked about the traits of, inattention, impulsiveness, and hyperactivity. While many people associate ADHD with those three types, it only represents the tip of the iceberg. So beneath the surface, ADHD can have a wide-reaching impact on various aspects of an individual's life. So it really goes beyond the common traits which we've spoken about, and it does affect an individual's mental well-being, their relationships, their daily functioning, and overall sense of control. So I just want you to consider what you can see underneath this iceberg here. So consider what impact this would have on somebody's personal relationships, what it would have on their impact in the workplace as well. So again, this is not, you don't need to participate and note anything in the chat, but just to sit with that and have a little look at some of the ones you can see underneath the iceberg. Okay. And just to highlight some of these, those with ADHD, we've mentioned about experiencing those big emotions, but those emotions can lead to things such as anxiety, guilt, shame, and anger. Life can feel quite chaotic and kind of messy sometimes. It might lead to struggles in staying organized and managing their responsibilities, so even paying bills. So individuals might actually harbor anger towards their own selves for their perceived differences. So that's when their emotions might be quite extreme or quite unpredictable as well. So really, what I want to highlight here is that we should maybe, have a trauma-informed approach to, I mean, every individual we meet, but be quite mindful that there might be a lot of things going underneath the surface which you might not see physically for an individual. Um, and if we just sit with this for a moment, I just want to highlight that there are also another element of high co-occurrence. So this is something which you might just not know of the prevalence, but in particular with ADHD, there is a high percentage of somebody going through the diagnostic pathway and coming out with multiple diagnosis. So here I just wanted to present a study from the Nottingham University. Um, Now, this is a cohort of individuals who went through the pathway and came out with a diagnosis of ADHD or additional diagnosis. So I'll talk about this in quite brief. In the grey here, so these are 30% of the cohort who only had a diagnosis of ADHD. Whereas we can see that 32% also had ADHD and co-occurring condition of depression. 25% were also autistic. 50% had an additional co-occurrence of dyslexia and dyscalculia. 50% were also dyspraxic, and 40% had an anxiety condition, and 25% had a tic condition. So really when I talk about the prevalence of co-occurrence and what we can see even on this slide, what it does is supporting the importance of taking a person-centered approach. So when you're providing workplace support, it's not using a diagnosis or stereotypes as a starting point, because each individual will have their own unique personal profile with their combination of skills, talents, and abilities. So we know co-occurrence. We also know that people might have things underneath going on for them. So this is when we're in the workplace, we're thinking about what can we do to support somebody, and this has to be very individual as much as we can in the workplace. So just to have a quick wee pause from listening to me, I'm going to show you a video. And this is just a video of somebody sharing their experience of ADHD as an adult, and they got diagnosed as um, throughout when they were adult. I think it was late 30s, but they will just confirm in the video, and then I will come back to you. If for any reason there's issues with sound, I'll just let Enya or Morag just give me a wave, but it should all work.
My name's Penny Jarrett. I'm a business developer, youth mentor, and blogger, and I have ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. ADHD is a mental disorder which causes behavioural issues. A lot of people think that people with ADHD can't pay attention, but the thing is we can just pay too much attention. So paying attention to the wrong things or a lot of things at once. Sometimes I feel like I've got 8 brains and each one has like 40 tabs open. I could be talking to someone and then another tab opens and I just start thinking about something else and I give it my full attention. Like I feel like I have to give it my full attention for like 3 seconds. People with ADHD have a lot of energy. So there's a lot of fidgeting, we can't keep still, we usually have struggles following instructions, we get distracted a lot. So it means that we don't finish things and sometimes don't even start things. There are loads of good things about ADHD too. So an ADHD brain is usually creative. There are loads of artists, comedians, singers. Yeah, there's loads of creatives. We've got great imaginations, which lead to a good sense of humour, so we're funny. And I think that's a lot to do with just doing funny things all the time. Like I sometimes find my remote in the fridge. Managing ADHD includes managing your environment, so you're not always going to have control over where you are. For instance, if I'm in a white room, like just completely bland, I find that I start getting kind of like breathless and panicky and like looking around and just can't focus on anything. But if I'm somewhere which is colourful and vibrant, I feel calm. And yeah, I think that's why my house is quite colourful. I didn't realise it before, but when I got diagnosed, I looked around me and I was like, okay. Managing and holding down a normal 9-to-5 job is mad. I've even walked out of meetings. I've been in meeting rooms and yeah, just had the urge to just walk out. I didn't even notice until I was halfway down the corridor that, was I just in a meeting? It's just the brain understimulated. It just searches for stimulation in any way. And if that has to be outside of that room, then yeah. Meetings get left. When I'm selling to customers on the phone, I make affirmation cards, handmade with Sharpies and pencils. And they have positive words on, things that I can look at and remember when I'm having anxious thoughts or just not feeling good. Even if I'm not trying to focus on something in particular, like a phone call, I need to be changing what I'm doing so that I can give enough energy to all my tasks. So if I had a to-do list with like 10 things on it for the day, where a neurotypical person might do each one at a time, maybe even put them in order of priority, I can't always figure out which one I should prioritize. And that's interesting actually, because people with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system. So yeah, we find prioritizing hard. If I time box myself and give 15 minutes to each thing and keep coming back, then I'm stimulated enough to complete all of them and yeah, at a high level. I was only diagnosed with ADHD last year when I was 30. So at first it was like such a negative to me. After doing a lot of research, I stopped feeling negative about ADHD because I learned about all the good things. The best thing about having ADHD, I think, is hyperfocus. And what that means is that we can actually zone into that thing for several hours and it not feel like several hours. And we go in so hard, masterpieces come out of it. And that's why, yeah, a lot of creatives, I think, they master what they do if they've got ADHD, because when hyperfocus kicks in, yeah, nothing will distract you, not even hunger or sleep. ADHD is manageable, so it doesn't have to remain negative and it doesn't have to like define you in a negative way. The symptoms of ADHD are with me and they always will be, but they don't have to define me in a negative way. If I learn how to manage my ADHD, then I learn how to manage my life and I can be just as productive and successful as I want, just not every single day.
Okay, so just following that video, of course, I want to highlight commonly reported ADHD strengths, because often enough the conversation can sometimes start with the differences and the traits, and I know we've spoken a lot about them today. So while ADHD can present various differences or challenges, it is important for us in the workplace to recognize individuals with ADHD and what unique strengths and abilities they do possess. So on the screen, I've highlighted a few of these. These are not going to reflect all of them, but I hope it will be an interesting conversation for us to shape and just highlight them. So in the video, it was highlighted that one of her main strengths, which she enjoyed, was that hyper focus. And that is really a notable strength. And it's their ability to hyper focus when something captures their imagination. So, despite difficulties with inattention or focus in some situations, individuals with ADHD can exhibit intense concentration and engagement when they are deeply interested in a particular task or subject. So, of course, this ability in the workplace can lead to exceptional productivity and achievement as well. Now, research has shown that for some ADHD individuals, if short-term memory might be a slight challenge, but actually, individuals often possess an excellent long-term memory. So this is again just being able to recall and demonstrate remarkable retention or information on a particular subject over an extended period of time. Again, this would be a valuable asset, of course, in the workplace and different professional endeavors as well, and of course, personal growth for an individual. Now, in terms of leadership qualities, this is very commonly associated with ADHD. So many individuals exhibit kind of comfort taking risks. They can navigate quite uncertain situations and quite thrive in high pressure crisis scenarios sometimes. So you need somebody who's quite quick thinking sometimes, somebody's resilient and adaptable. And ADHD are quite attracted to these roles and can be an exceptional individual in that role as well. Creativity, again, within the video, they highlighted a few even famous individuals, but creative thinking is another strength observed in individuals with ADHD. So it's possessing a unique ability to think outside the box, approach problems with from unconventional angles as well. So kind of that visual thinking as well. Attracted to novel ideas. I think that's quite related to creativity there. So really drawn to new experiences. And again, if you're having a team meeting, don't you want somebody in that meeting to be like, hey, think of something completely new, because then you've got a new solution. So it's somebody who is staying curious. It's somebody who is kind of a constantly evolving and actually contributing to new things, which is really vital. Likewise with that, it's kind of pattern spotting. So might spot something which somebody didn't, and that interpersonal skill. So this is a particular one with individuals with ADHD. They often shine in terms of their interpersonal skills. So tend to possess qualities such as being quite open-minded, have a lot of empathy, some intuition when communicating with others, and quite a lot of compassion as well. And of course, these traits can facilitate their ability to connect with others on a deep level. So again, on that workplace, to be able to offer support and understanding is really important. Of course, there's actually a lot more I could talk about, but I just think it's very crucial to acknowledge and celebrate the strengths of individuals with ADHD. And I think by recognizing and harnessing these positive qualities, we can unlock somebody's full potential and, have it enhance their ability to have a significant contribution in their workplace, but also various of other aspects of their life as well. So just to kind of finishing off today's session, we've only got 5 minutes left and I'm really keen to answer some questions. So I'm just going to kind of skip through this page today and just kind of really give you some practical things which we're able to do to support somebody in the workplace. So we've got kind of providing written instructions. So I think, these are practical things. These things don't cost money. So if you are meeting somebody, having to be, this is written or send in an email, send it into a text, whatever is going to be suitable for that individual. We've got specialized spell checks, so technology and software can be our friends. I will absolutely send you some examples if people aren't aware of technology. We've got reminders and prompts. We've got information in various formats, so use pictures, icons. Walk and talk meetings, I kind of mentioned that. It might be that you have coaching or mentoring that can be really significant for individuals, making sure you have regular and short breaks, and focus on single tasks or break down information. I think giving a time frame from individuals can be really helpful. Supporting with things at, even on Teams, like do not disturb, just people do they know that they can use that? So things don't pop up. Even for me, if I don't have my Outlook closed or my Teams closed and I'm delivering something like today, I will get distracted. So, it's important that people are aware of these things, and it might be that coaching them or showing them to do that as well. Lots more. You're going to have this presentation, so you're going to have these examples as well. But I'm really keen, just for the 5 minutes we've got left, to answer any questions which have popped up. Again, if I haven't been able to answer everything today, I will make sure a follow-up email is sent. And of course, any resources which I've mentioned today, you'll get. So just to flag up maybe Morag or Enya, if there's any questions which I can answer from the chat, I'd be happy to do so.
Thanks, Nelly. That was incredibly helpful, and you've packed a lot into that session. We will share the recording of the session together with a link to the video, which I know some of the chat function had been asking for. And do feel free, please, to circulate the recording and the link to the video as you see fit to others to whom it may be of interest or help. So just quickly, we may not get through them all, and if we can't, we can follow up along with the recording and the link with some responses to some of the questions that have been asked.
Absolutely.
There's a comment that's been made as to whether there's connection between menopause and ADHD symptoms, some similarities, but also to the extent to which ADHD symptoms might be exacerbated by the menopause.
Yeah, I mean, there's a significant amount of research coming out and actually lived experience at the moment where, females actually for ADHD, women are the highest number of cohort getting an ADHD diagnosis at the moment. So I suppose that even correlation in terms of people maybe going through the menopause. So there is some significant research and there is definitely a link there. I will include in the link a couple examples of some articles which might be helpful for people if they are interested in that. I am actually hoping to do a bit of a webinar on menopause and neurodiversity as well. So maybe somebody would like to be interested in that when available, but I'll send some resources on. But yeah, there is a significant research showing that is a link, and lived experience as well.
Great, thanks, Nelly. A few commenting on just where there is a private diagnosis, the difficulty with in getting GPs to accept shared care. There's and the criteria, I think, it seems to vary for the basis on which GPs will do so, particularly in terms of children versus adults, etc. And I think also the regional and kind of local differences in terms of approach that's taken to that.
Yeah, I mean it is yeah, I can't even give you a straight answer, Morag, because it is different in different settings. Like I said, that you know there are cases where individuals have got a private diagnosis and then able to get shared care, but in some places there's not. I know that some adults who I've spoken and kind of supported, they've got a private diagnosis, but then they also end up getting themselves on the waiting list just so that they are able to have a NHS diagnosis as well. So I think it's just being able to advocate as much as you can and maybe get advice from your GP and just say to your GP, you've gone through this private diagnosis, and they might be able to support with a letter of support in terms of what shared care or what you support you're looking for.
And of course, the significance of shared care is that to the extent that you are prescribed medication for ADHD, that will be funded through the
Yeah.
NHS.
Yeah.
Um, and which brings us on to the kind of general kind of medication shortage in relation to
Mm,
ADHD, particularly felt from last summer. It's ongoing. Anecdotally seems to be worse down
mm.
south. It was a bit better, but that has been extremely challenging for those who rely on ADHD medication.
Yeah, no, it absolutely has. It's significant. And I think even just for us to be able to talk about a few adjustments and approaches, like which what we can do to support, which is a bit more holistic, might be able to do some for of support in the meantime. But I know a lot even young people who, in terms of sleep been impacted, but even adults as well. So I think it's as much as each individual, if they can, you know, try to find out about themselves in terms of what supports them that without medication that can be supportive as well, but it's a challenge, Morag, it is, and it's still ongoing at the moment with the medication shortage.
There are a couple of questions around disclosure,
Hmm.
where someone doesn't want disclosure, but how then do you support them with adjustments? And so the last session will talk more about fostering
Yes. Yeah.
inclusive environment and encouraging disclosure in an appropriate way
Yeah.
to support people. So I won't address those specifically. And we are out of time now. I hope that was useful for you all. As I say, we'll follow up with the recording, the links, and the other materials that Nelly has provided. The link, the very first entry in the chat session, gives you a link to the other sessions which are running. The next session will be on Tuesday, the 3rd of September, on understanding autism in the workplace, a bit of historical context in relation to that. Nelly will be talking about the common profiles, strengths, differences, and effective support strategies and adjustments in the workplace. On the 11th of September, the focus will be on dyspraxia and dyslexia, and then the final session on the 18th, as I say, just on fostering inclusive workplace conversations and talking about disclosure. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning, and huge thanks to Nelly for such an insightful and comprehensive session. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.